Ready? Ellis? Turned on my microphone. Good evening and welcome to the October 14th, 2019 meeting of the Shawnee City Council. I would ask that you please silence your electronic devices at this time. I am Mayor Michelle Dissler. I'll be chairing this meeting. I'll do a roll call at this time. Councilmember Zimmerman is absent. Councilmember Neighbor?
Present.
Councilmember Jenkins?
Present.
Councilmember Kimley?
Present.
Councilmember Meyer? Present. Councilmember Larson-Bonnell? Present. Councilmember Sandifer?
Present.
Councilmember Constance? Present. Thank you. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I'll explain our procedures for public input. During the meeting, I'll offer the opportunity for public input. If you'd like to speak to the council at any of those times, please come forward to the microphone. I'll ask you to state your name and address for the record. You may offer your comments. So that members of the audience can hear your comments, I would ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no person may speak more than twice to any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Comments and remarks that are personal, impertinent, or slanderous are not permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted. After you're finished, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. In addition, while we won't do a roll call vote on every vote, I will state council members' names who vote in minority so that our listening audience will have a clear and accurate record of the vote. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have an item they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is mayor's items, and I have 2 items tonight. So if Hallie Vincent will join me up front at the dais. Oh, I had to bring a whole script down because wait till you guys hear all this. So, the first item tonight is the Good Starts Here certificate. So I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize one of our residents tonight. Hallie Vincent. It's safe to say that a 10-year-old Hallie has caught the public service bug. It all started with one fundraiser for Great Plains SPCA. That sparked a passion for service in Hallie, and things quickly grew from there. Hallie then masterminded a kid-powered philanthropy called Paws Up KC. Hallie's energy and organization spurred her school to jump on board, and Clay Platte Montessori just wrapped up their 2nd year of bake sales and donation drives to benefits Paws Up KC. Hallie's organization has also grown as well, now benefiting the amazing organization called Chain of Hope, which helps dogs found tethered to chains or those that might be stuck outside in the cold. I know you're probably already impressed. I sure am, but that is not all. Hallie has also decided to spearhead a program to have local kids sign up to read books to cats and dogs at Great Plains SPCA. May I remind you that Hallie is only 10 years old. 10. We cannot thank Hallie enough for her service to our community, and we're honored that you're helping spread the importance of service and kindness right here in Shawnee. So with that, I'd like to present you with a Good Starts Here certificate and a challenge coin, and not just anyone receives a challenge coin. Historically, they've been presented to honor a person in recognition of special achievement or going above and beyond, and you have obviously done that. So thank you so much for all you do. Much. Keep up the good work. Hopefully more people will follow your example, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. The next item is World Polio Day Proclamation. So if there's anyone from the Rotary Club that would like to join me up front. Awesome.
Oh no.
Okay, so from the Office of the Mayor, a proclamation in recognition of World Polio Day. Whereas Rotary International, founded on February 25th, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois, USA, is the world's first and largest nonprofit service organization. And whereas there are over 1.2 million Rotary Club members comprised of professional and business leaders in over 35,000 clubs in 200 countries and geographic areas, including over 50 Rotary clubs in Shawnee. The Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide excellent service, encourage high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. Whereas the Rotary in 1995 launched Polio Plus to help to establish the global polio eradication initiative. It includes the World Health Organization, U.S. and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the Rotary has contributed more than $1.9 billion to countless 2.5 billion children in 122 countries. Whereas the Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million for years, further leverage for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually for the Foundation. In addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments to contribute more than $8 million to effort. And whereas in spirit of many other governments, organizations, and entities around the world should use community awareness by using outdoor illumination on October 24th to highlight the progress toward the importance of eradicating polio. Now, therefore, I, Michelle Disler, the Mayor of the City of Shawnee, hereby proclaim Thursday, October 24th, 2019, the World Polio Day, and encourage all citizens to join in the fight to break polio-free world.
Okay, let me get a couple pictures here.
Oh, sorry.
The next item is business from the floor. Is there anyone who has comments on an issue that is not on tonight's agenda? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Tracy Thomas, 13022 West 76th Terrace in Seven Hills. Just 8 more years till Hallie can run for mayor. Keep coming to these meetings. Great work. I would like to propose that Shawnee enact a new rule going forward that anyone who wants to file for city council be current on their property taxes because they're in charge of our property taxes. Someone filed this time when she announced she was,
This isn't a city issue. We have no authority over any of that.
you could.
No, we don't. A felon can file to run for office if they want to. They can't vote for themselves, but they can file to run for office. We have no authority over the election
But
law.
the city could do it. This woman was $62,000 behind, 4 years behind on her property
We're
tax.
not going to discuss this.
Okay, next, the 75th Street survey that I took this week was a rigged survey. It doesn't have any no tab, none of the above. It has things like, well, do you want a 10-foot wide bike path and walking path with a 2-foot buffer, which so 10 plus 2 is 12, right, Hallie? Or do you want an 8-foot wide bike path with a 4-foot buffer? And 8 plus 4 is also 12. But it didn't say, no, I don't want that at all. I don't want you to take 12 feet out of 75th Street and put it. Then it said, do you want us to have a crosswalk to go to Shawnee Elementary School? That's not even the name of the school. So if you're hiring people to do surveys and paying them great amounts of money and they don't even know the name of the school, that tells you that this is some fad cooked up by the National League of Cities, and I think you're going to ruin 75th Street, much like the road diet and the in and out on Neiman Never, or Neiman Now, whatever it's called. And so I'm concerned that this survey, it did not offer the citizens any input on what would be important. Coming up in 2 weeks is the so-called luxury apartments that Kevin Tubasing wants to build on a 20-foot wide ditch road, Rogers Road, which the neighbors brought up as being a shortcut to avoid avoid the traffic on Shawnee Mission Parkway. And it's a ditch road. I just spoke with a woman tonight who, she was run off the road into the ditch, had to call a tow truck. Now, any other developer who came to the city of Shawnee would not be allowed to build off of a 20-foot ditch road, a so-called luxury apartment complex. They would either be required to make the improvements themselves or wait for the city to do it. But it's not on this capital improvements plan, so it would take at least 3 years. The colors in the proposal that you will see are very misleading, and they were misleading to the Planning Commission because it shows a light blue. It shows vertical stripes like referee shirts, and 30% of one side of the building is these referee stripes. Now, he shows them in light blue, but it's really, he said, well, he calls it Confederate blue. So I looked up Confederate blue or Bonnie blue, and I looked up the colors of the NFL, of the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos. It's exactly halfway between those two really dark blue colors. And a vertical, stripe pattern like that, that's not luxury. There's not one luxury property, commercial or residential, in Johnson County or Greater Kansas City that uses vertical striping in that bright and dark of a color. And there are many other problems with the project, but I urge you to require him when he comes to your meeting to correct his presentation so you can really see how this looks like a referee shirt, and the fact that someone brought up at the Planning Commission, the signage is like an arena because it's a block, it's behind Old Shawnee Pizza, and so it's a block off of Neiman. He's got giant signage on there, whereas every other apartment complex in Shawnee gets their little 8-foot monument sign. Nothing spectacular. And so I wonder what the city's rush is. Let's just do this right, and let's not have people being run off the road into the ditch with 67 dogs peeing and pooping in the neighborhood. This needs to be tabled. But he's threatened to leave, or threatened to take his ball and his bat and go home. I don't know why Shawnee is willing to sacrifice up to 6 of their guidelines that they require every other builder to follow in order to cater to Kevin Tubasing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has comments on an issue not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is public items. Item number 1 is to conduct a public hearing to consider the Community Development Block Grant 2020 to 2024 Consolidated Plan and 2020 Annual Action Plan. This is the second and final public hearing for approval of the CDBG Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan. I will accept a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are now in a public hearing. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Rodney Houck, 12807 West 70th Terrace. I've been watching this community development block grant program probably for about 10 years. The numbers really don't change very much. This year, the minor home rehabilitation program has increased from 25,000 to 35,000. 35,000. We're a city of 65,000 people, and that's all we can put into a minor home rehabilitation program? What can we do to get that number much higher? Can we write grants? Something has to happen. It isn't right. I have spent, this is our third election this year, and I've spent a lot of time on the streets, and I know how many homes need to have some kind of improvement. More than just, a lot of them just more than minor. But Mr. Sunderman, maybe you could appoint an independent task force to really look at how other cities are funding such needs. You know, I know you're not too much in favor of having residents side by side with your staff, but maybe just have that task force report to you directly. I'd like to encourage you to have an independent group looking at other cities and exploring how we might raise that number. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to conclude the public hearing.
Motion to conclude the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The public hearing is now closed. There are two actions to consider. First recommended action is consider approving the Community Development Block Grant 2020-2024 Consolidated Plan and Action Plan. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Accept a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The second recommended action is consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the 2020 Community Development Block Grant application. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is to consider passing ordinance number 46, repealing Charter Ordinance number 43, and exempting the city from K.S.A. 13-1024A pertaining to general improvements, borrowing money, and bond issues. The proposed charter ordinance broadens the types of improvements set out in Charter Ordinance number 43 that may be debt financed by general obligation bonds to include streetlights and any other improvement or equipment, whether owned by the city, another government entity, or a private party, when the governing body finds that such improvement serves a public purpose. Before I ask for council discussion or public input, I'd like to have the city attorney, Rainey, speak on the proposed charter ordinance. I want to make sure that everybody on the council and the residents are all clear on what exactly is happening, because I received some feedback. I had seen some comments on Nextdoor. There seems to be a misunderstanding of what is being talked about tonight. So, Mr. Rainey, if you could clarify some of the...
I'll try. Thank you, Mayor. There was a lot of misinformation that I just became aware of at some point in time this afternoon. And some of it caused me a little bit of a concern. This charter ordinance does not authorize the issuance of any bonds or approve or authorize any projects. And I made a bullet list. I'm sorry. These issues kept coming up, and the city manager and I identified some issues, and so we were trying to put them in a bullet form so everyone could follow them more easily. And while Stephen is getting that, that first item, I want to be clear that any future projects or bond issues will have to be approved by the governing body. We still go through the same process you guys have always gone through for the issuance of general improvement bonds or general obligation bonds. There will be a resolution of intent, and then there'll be an ordinance that will authorize the issuance of the GO bonds for that specific purpose. And I guess I'll put this down here that may help identify these. Obviously, I'm going to have to go through them. The Charter Ordinance does not authorize construction or acquisition of a community center or have anything to do with a proposed community center. I don't know where that came from. The community center authority to issue GO bonds was passed back in 1987 in Charter Ordinance number 16. As you recall, we could have simply passed a GO bond instead of doing the public election, but we chose to do the public election process and get the community involvement. The proposed Charter Ordinance does not change any GO bond limit. The bond limits were eliminated by Charter Ordinance 43 in 2005. The proposed Charter Ordinance does not change any public vote requirement. The current Charter Ordinance, which is number 43, says the city may borrow money and issue bonds without such bonds having been authorized by a public vote. There's no change to that requirement. The proposed Charter Ordinance does not change any requirement for governing body approval of any project. As I indicated before, we still go through the same project process. We still go through the same general obligation bond process. You will not issue bonds on something this governing body has not done a resolution of intent and has not passed an ordinance authorizing that particular public improvement project and the issuance of general obligation bonds for that purpose. I don't know where the idea came up that this Charter Ordinance was changing any of that. It is not changing any of that. This Charter Ordinance, let's see if I had any other ones down here, is required to issue to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds to finance and purchase the Evergy KCP&L streetlight system. That is the next item on your agenda. And there's no hidden agenda here. There's no intent to conceive any type of authority mechanism that does not already exist. It's a simple fact that when we reviewed Charter Ordinance number 43, we discovered that the ordinance authority does not authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds to pay for the streetlights. The words aren't in there. I don't know why the words aren't in there. Back in
55.
1955?
They were in there in 1955. They were taken out in 1987.
Okay. Streetlight power. A streetlight power plant. It was in the original ordinance, the original state statute. It's just not in the ordinance. And as I came to trying to review all of this, and I went back to the history, I discovered that it seems like what we do every 10 years or so is we find something that's not included in our existing charter ordinance, and we change it because it wasn't there. 1955 K.S.A. 131024A, electric light plant is in there. It just didn't get carried over to the city charter ordinance. The charter ordinance 16 in September of 1987 added the authority for off-street parking facilities, recreational facilities, storm sewers, and drainage improvements. Those items just weren't listed in the prior statute, and at some point in time, this governing body determined they wanted to make those improvements and issue GO bonds, and we went undoubtedly back to the charter ordinance and said, oh, it's not in there, let's put it in there. So the governing body put it in there. In Charter Ordinance number 22, February 1997, they did another change to the charter ordinance, and in that year they increased the total amount of bonds that can be issued for such purposes without an election to $1 million in any calendar year. And the original statute had a limit of $100,000, and in this day and age that obviously doesn't pay for a lot of public improvements. So it changed. And back in Charter Ordinance 35 in October of 2005, we added the authority for golf courses and fiber optic cable systems. So undoubtedly at the time we were talking about creating a fiber optic system. And back in 1955, when they wrote that statute, they weren't thinking a lot about fiber optic systems. So we added it into the Charter Ordinance. And Charter Ordinance number 43 in April of 2013 added the authority for streets, trafficways, sidewalks, trails, stormwater controls, curbs, and gutters. It wasn't in the prior Charter Ordinance, and it wasn't contemplated in the 1955 ordinance. So we keep going back and we find public improvements that you all want to issue general obligation bonds for, and we realize it wasn't in the Charter Ordinance authority, so we change the Charter Ordinance every few years. It's more than every few years. It's probably every 10 or 15 years. I went through that whole description for you because the second thing that this Charter Ordinance does do, other than authorize the streetlight acquisition, is it contains a generic reference to a public improvement and a definition of a public improvement that K.S.A. created and drafted and designed to avoid you having to come back and change this Charter Ordinance when in 10 years you've identified another public improvement that you hadn't considered or that wasn't previously considered by a governing body when you adopted the prior Charter Ordinance. And that was the intent of that. It was not an intent to approve any particular project. It was not an intent to authorize any particular project. And it doesn't do that. The public improvement project still has to be authorized by you all as a governing body. Are there any questions on that before I move to the last one?
Councilmember Meyer?
Thank you. Just a question, I guess, of the language. Do we need the more broad language that K.S.A. drafted now for anything other than the streetlights? My thought is, can we just kind of narrow the scope a little bit and just call it streetlights, and then assume in 10 years that another governing body will come in and make any changes that they need to if something comes up?
My answer to that question is this governing body gets to tell me whether that's necessary or not. I know that there are some issues that are coming up on a large project where there's some concern that the city may need to issue GO bonds to pay for some improvements to the storm sewer system in that area that may be necessary. And yes, the governing body could come back and pass a Charter Ordinance every time you identify a new project or a new public improvement project that's not in the existing Charter Ordinance or in the existing statute. Of course, we chartered out of the statute. But
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just a little anxious about going overly broad if we don't need to, if we can do a scalpel instead of a chainsaw, I guess.
that was the intent. You had been authorizing or paying for those types of projects as grants. And this change in this ordinance proposed by K.S.A. was intended to allow you to avoid issuing or spending the money in the form of a grant. You could now issue a general obligation bond.
Thank you.
And let me get to my last one here. We've already gone over all those, obviously. The intent was to authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds to pay for the streetlight system. And the last one we covered earlier. And in regard to your current question, the existing Charter Ordinance number 43 did not include the authority to issue for projects on private property that you all deem to be a public improvement or necessary for a public purpose. And specifically, the governing body could find that the project serves a public purpose and issue bonds to cover the cost, knowing that the developer will own the system until it is accepted by Johnson County Wastewater. And that specifically is an intended reference to the Homeland Project.
Councilmember Jenkins?
Yes, I've got a couple issues. First of all, I'm in complete agreement with what was just said by Councilwoman Meyer, and I feel the exact same way. I like to use the scalpel here, and there's a reason for that, and I think it's very important when I want to underscore it. That is that changing a charter ordinance requires a 2/3 vote. That sets it aside and different from just a majority vote that you would do, if we're going to issue GO bonds. So it provides that extra checks and balances in the system, and when you open that language up and just make it so general like that, you can drive a truck through it. And I'd like to be focused down on it because this provision, I think, is important to the council and it's important to the citizens because it gives them that mechanism to kind of hold our feet to the fire, which is a good thing. And so I would like to see, if we're going to do this, I'm okay with the lights because we've talked about the lights. We're going to do the lights. Everything's good there, so I'm fine with modifying the charter ordinance to include making a purchase for streetlights for the city to take ownership of those. So I see in the long term, I believe we got a 7-year payout on that, and after 7 years, they'll be coming out on the black on that from then on, and so I think it's a good thing, and it's good for the citizens, it's good for the budget. So, yeah, but the fact that it would take a 2/3 vote is why I think it's good to keep this charter ordinance limited to what we need. And when the item comes up, fine, we'll discuss that item as it comes up. I understand there probably will be an item coming up in the not too distant future where we're putting in the industrial park out there. And there's going to be a sewer issue there where they're going to be private sewers and eventually they're going to be turned over to the county and we're going to get involved with issuing some GO bonds. And we can address that issue when we come to it if we need to. And obviously we will need to at that point. But I don't think that's a really big hoop for us to jump through to change the charter ordinance if we need to at the time. So I'd like to just, like I say, limit it to only authorizing that the KCP&L purchase of the streetlights be added to the list of those acceptable, those things acceptable under the Charter Ordinance 43. New 46, excuse me.
Mr. Neighbor? Oh, okay. Any other questions or comments from the council?
My recommendation on that, I'm sorry to, Stephen and I and Stephanie talked quite a bit about the fact that we're a little worried about going back each time and changing Charter Ordinance number 43. So I think what we would prefer, if that's what the governing body chooses to do tonight, is that if we do this, then we have a charter ordinance that will authorize the issuance of general obligation bonds for a specific item, such as what you just spoke of, rather than going back and trying to amend Charter Ordinance 43 to include all of this stuff as we go along. It obviously, over a period of 50 years, you tend to miss some things that you intended to be in there.
So that might have been how the streetlights fell out in the first place.
I don't even know what streetlight plant is, but I'm assured by Mr. Hooper that it included a streetlight system. He knew the generic term. But my other concern is if that's what you want to, if that is what the council wants to do, it is a charter ordinance and it's kind of a big deal. So I would prefer that we actually look at the text that would be changed if that's the decision of the governing body and the way you want to go.
Mr. Neighbor?
I've written it up and I can put it in the record. I think that our city manager and the rest of us that have worked on this streetlight acquisition for several years now are a little concerned about causing a further delay by wrapping the rest of this into it. If that's the way you want to proceed, then we can just do a charter ordinance authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds for the purpose of paying for the construction, purchase, or improvement of a streetlight system to be acquired from Evergy. I mean, I think it's that simple, if that's what you want to do. There are other tweaks in the ordinance that need to be made, but oh boy, that was a lot of silence. Okay. If that's the route you want to go. That's what I want to see,
yeah. So if that's what you're waiting to hear, I'll say it.
This is what I think we need to do. We're not repealing Charter Ordinance 43 at this point. We're just adopting another alternate provision for authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds. So that first line at the end of Charter Ordinance goes out in the caption, and then we would be eliminating to exempt the city from K.S.A. 131024A because we've already exempted ourselves from it by Charter Ordinance 43. And the next whereas would go away because we are not repealing Charter Ordinance 43 at this point. And then in my lovely scribble down here in section 2, you would be for the purpose of paying for the construction, purchase, or improvement of a streetlight system to be acquired from Evergy the city may borrow money and issue its general obligation bonds for the same purposes. Obviously, the rest of the text becomes moot as well because it goes away because you're not doing the rest of those provisions. So next, section 4 would be the next section, which is a section on publication once each week, and when the charter ordinance takes effect after the 61 days.
Thank you. I'll get comments from the audience and then see which direction we want to go.
And for the record, then I'm going to mark this as Exhibit 1 and initial it so we have that clear. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone from the audience want to comment on this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Lose your pen?
I lost a lot of stuff, but I don't see it up
Oh,
there.
here's a red one. Give you a red one or a white one? Tracy Thomas, 13022 West 76th Terrace in Shawnee in Seven Hills. So I want to respond. I'm glad that you're going to change this to just just an ordinance for the streetlights and not change the charter. And I do want to respond to Mr. Rainey, who's a very wonderful guy, but there are 46% of the voters showed up in May and turned down a city proposal because they did not agree with it. And then the city never looked at why it didn't pass. So there are a lot of people who don't trust the city. That the ballot wording was very deceptive. It did not include the $16 million of interest. But it said in the wording that it covered financing. Well, interest and financing are the same thing, regardless of what Ms. Bunnell claims, that they're different. And so we felt that you were trying to sneak in $16 million of financing. What is the difference between a project or an improvement for a public purpose or these grants? You know, it's loosey-goosey language, and that's why people are suspicious. Then you look at, it doesn't have to be approved now. You've got 2 of the 6 council members are leaving for sure. And then you look at Merriam, where they just recently passed that they were going to build a new pool, and then the city turned around and said, no, we're only going to build half the size of the pool, and we're going to put in a 6-story parking structure and give parkland away to a library. So that was a bait and switch. So there is suspicion on the part of the public. And so the reason for this wording, and I appreciate that things fall in and fall out, but this felt like a blank check, and it felt like a Trojan horse. That, that there are people who are still out campaigning for mayor claiming we still want a community center, and yet the city never took upon themselves to find out why this thing failed 72 to 28%. So there are reasons that people are reluctant to change the charter. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're just going to pay for the streetlights. All you need to do is just cap it or name it. We don't need to have 6 people changing it forever.
Anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Ray Ehrlichman, 7510 Garnett Street here in Shawnee. I have no comments either way on the merits of the ordinance. That's not what I want to talk about. I want to address the procedure. This council and councils before this pass ordinances all the time. But a charter ordinance is a little bit different than some of the other ordinances that you pass. It doesn't tell you how many pets you can have, setback of additional buildings on a property or anything like that. It's a building block. The cities in Kansas operate on charter ordinances as their building blocks. Other cities around the country have actual charters. And then states have constitutions. So a charter ordinance is not just an ordinary ordinance. It's the building block for all other actions. And I just wanted to address the issue of the fact that this popped up on the agenda on a Thursday night with action supposedly being taken this evening, which is 96 hours, 48 of them being a weekend. And I just think that that was not the right way to go on a charter ordinance. Because it is a building block, I believe that a charter ordinance needs to go before the council committee first, get everything aired out, as we've been doing now, let people look into it and research it, make modifications as necessary, and then bring it back before the council. But don't put it on a charter ordinance on an agenda on a Thursday and expect it to be acted upon on a Monday night. I think that's being, shall we say, that's not being, serving the public in the right way. Not on a charter ordinance. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience like to speak to this item? State your name and address for the record.
My name is Roxanne Salas. I live at 11606 West 68th Place, Shawnee Village. So we just learned about this ordinance tonight, and coming here and listening to the city attorney, we're kind of upset to hear that curbs and sidewalks were already in this ordinance when our children are playing on streets with no drainage, no sidewalks, no curbs. And after speaking with several members of the government, being told it's given precedence to neighborhoods within distance to parks, schools, those kind of things. We're in walking distance to 3 parks and 3 schools. We still don't have these things, but we're sitting here arguing about streetlights. It makes no sense. So I think if you're going to do it, it needs to only be streetlights, because we're not ready for anything else. We have no infrastructure. We go to other cities, we see everything that they're doing. We still need sidewalks and drainage, because our yard floods every time it rains. So while not having LED streetlights is not a great big thing to us, it definitely does need to be dumbed down to just streetlights, because we have other issues that definitely need to be focused on. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a side note, hopefully part of the benefit of it, I grew up in Shawnee Village myself, so I know exactly what you're talking about at 69th and Flint. But part of it is to curb and gutter and sidewalk the 57 lane miles in Shawnee that doesn't have them, is at a cost of $154 million. And with the street lights, the reason the governing body is proceeding is it's proposed to save us over $10 million. So that's money that then can start help to do some of these infrastructure things that you're talking about. So it frees up some of that to be able to do those things. So I don't feel anybody on the governing body is purchasing the lights because they take that as a priority. They take the money savings as a priority so that we can do other things.
And that's understandable, but we are paying a special tax, Parks and Pipes. And we've only owned our homes for 5 years, but I sell these houses to everybody else. And when I sell houses in Shawnee Village, and everybody says, well, where's the curbs and sidewalks? So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
First time, Dustin Salas, 11606 West 68th Place, Shawnee Village. You talk about the overall cost of the lane miles that still need to be developed, but you look at cities like Merriam, they're putting in sidewalks, as simple as sidewalks in places that don't have any. You know, you guys did 67th up to your, city limits, and then Merriam's been adding sidewalks, little changes. I'm not saying spend the however many million you need, but add 100 feet of sidewalk here, or a couple hundred feet here, taking small chunks, but yet you guys keep going saying, well, we just can't afford it. We can't afford it. Meanwhile, my kids have to grow up in Shawnee Village, walking in the ditches, being run off the road, But as long as we have the streetlights and they can see at night, so they can play under the streetlight, it makes no sense, And I do a lot of work for Shawnee Village residents because I'm a contractor. They got the same thing, everyone's complaining about the community center, complaining about nothing being done, but yet streets are failing, the houses look like crap, but yet you guys were on me. I was city codes about this and that and trailer, having a business, trailer in my driveway, so I spent all this money and then I had nothing but problems with city council. I can't have my driveway looking like this, I can't have it too wide. If you put in a driveway, well, you're gonna have to put in a culvert. And you guys didn't help me one bit of the way, except try to say, you can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. But you guys can't even give me a sidewalk for my children to walk on. That's it.
Yeah, and like I said, I walk to Neiman Elementary every day, and so that's part of why the cost is so high. It's not just about a sidewalk. The complete street has to be redone with the sloping in order for the storm
What year was it when you walked to Neiman Elementary?
I started kindergarten in 78 to 86.
Okay, 78 to 86. Has that stretch or that section of Shawnee Village gotten any better in that time?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. You get utility companies come through and dig up the road, they half-ass put it back, and a little concrete, it's a big divot. You can't even smooth it out. You can't even hold those guys accountable. You got the gas company coming in, just wrecking everyone's yard, wrecking everyone's easement, wrecking their fences.
Well, and that type of stuff, though, do let us know, because we
I did.
Okay, because we did have a utility that caused a dip in the road, and they had to come back out and fix that, so let us
Yeah,
know.
well, National Pipeline pulled in my $13,000 driveway and leaked oil all over it and said, the city gave us the authority to do this. We're going to do it whether you like it or not. If you don't, then I guess your meter's not going to get moved up to your house. You're going to have to pay for it. You can take it up with the city with Kansas Gas. That's the kind of treatment we get. It's like you think we're Eastern Shawnee, we're low-level poverty, whatever the case may be, and you just steamroll over us. Yet all the work I do in Western Shawnee, the streets look good, the houses look good, everything's upkept, but we can't get a single thing in Shawnee Village. I know it's only one neighborhood, but you gotta start somewhere. You can't keep saying that the price is too high. The price is too high. I'm sure even now the price is too damn high, but yeah, we keep working on it and it's still going and it's not getting any better. So that's the problem I have. I lived here 5 years and nothing's changed. But we're worried about streetlights. I got plenty of streetlights on my street. What I don't have is any drainage, backyard flooding, property damage from storm water runoff. What are we going to do about that?
No, I get it, and that was part of the feedback we received from the residents during the Imagineering sessions, is they want us to prioritize this. So, and that's what we do, is priority-based budgeting. So we've got to figure out a plan, and we've got to get it done. So
if you could spend $3 million on streetlights, why can't we spend $1 million on a mile of sidewalks somewhere, anything? Why can't we start somewhere? That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Sandifer, did you have a comment?
Yes, I have a comment on that. Spending the money for the streetlights we have a return on our dollars coming in.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to save the city money. On the sidewalks, curbs, gutters, and all of that. You mentioned Merriam. Of all the cities that you could mention, because Merriam, next to Overland Park, probably has the most sales tax coming in because they have all the car dealerships.
Mm.
They have more money coming in than you would believe right now. And the money coming in at that point, they're using to redo all their streets, all their sidewalks, all their curbs. They're redoing every street that they have, even if they didn't need it.
Yeah.
They're going through everything. They have the money. We are still somewhat, and we're working on that, of a bedroom community.
Yeah.
We need more tax revenue. We want more business. We want to get more taxes in here.
But
We can do more
it's
work.
not business. We need to focus on
But the
business.
point is, on streetlights, there's a return on the dollars. That's why we're doing that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money going to be spent if we don't do this.
Mm.
And this is for your benefit as well as mine, for us to make this decision and do this on the streetlights.
Well, I'm okay with it now that after you listen to him speak, and crossing out any improvement and making it, like with the scalpel in it, exactly what it's meant for and nothing more.
But
But
to insinuate that we don't want to
broad-
help you with your streets and sidewalks and your storm drainage is a misunderstanding in your part, because we're up here to help everybody in Shawnee. Now, in your community, if we sat down and we went door to door with the people that are wanting streets and sidewalks, not everybody in that community is going to want streets and sidewalks.
City of Shawnee didn't help me because I had three residents.
Your
But
5
that-
minutes are up, so I'm sorry,
Right.
we do have to come to a stop here.
Okay.
Anyone else from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none.
Mayor, before you make a motion, I
sorry.
want to make sure that the packet item ordinance draft was approved by Kutek Rock. The revision that Mr. Jenkins requested has not been reviewed by Kutek Rock. I've talked to him about it. So you have two options. If you go with the option that Mr. Jenkins suggested, that we just revised in Exhibit 1 or A1, I would like the motion to be that it is subject to approval of Kutek Rock, our Finance Council, please.
Okay, so the recommended action is to consider, so we're not, is it still considered ordinance number 46? Okay. Charter ordinance number 46, since this is a charter ordinance, it requires 2/3 vote of the governing body, including the mayor. So I will accept a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion on ordinance number 46, Charter Ordinance number 46, that it be passed, but be passed with the changes that were discussed here in the council meeting and that were shown to everybody here with the exhibit number 1, and be subject to Kutek Rock's approval.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Neighbor?
Aye.
Jenkins?
Aye.
Kimley?
Aye.
Meyer?
Aye.
Larson Bennell?
Aye.
Sandifer?
Aye.
Constance?
Aye.
Oh, and I vote aye. Motion passes. Item number 3 is to consider contract number 2019-080 with Evergy Metro, Inc., formerly KCP&L, for the purchase of streetlights. For the last 2 years, staff has negotiated with Evergy to purchase the streetlights. The negotiated purchase price is $3,250,000. An agreement is required. If the governing body approves the purchase, a bond package would be brought back to the council at a later date. The recommended action is consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the final contract as approved by the city attorney. Is there any discussion from the council? Mr. Jenkins?
Yeah, just something I'd like to bring up, and that is that we started out on this process with KCP&L saying we want $5 million. And it's been a long process of back and forth. I think I want to congratulate the staff, Nolan and the rest of you that worked so hard on this thing to bring that number down. That's a substantial difference between 5 million and 3.25. And that really does help us out a lot as far as getting that payout period shortened down where it really is meaningful rather than, gee, we're just so far off, who cares kind of thing. At 7 years is something you can see the end of the tunnel on that one. So just want everybody to understand where we came from and the starting point and where we are now. So that's a big savings.
Any other comments from the council? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Yeah, you have to go up here, state your name and address for the record.
Susan Curto, 5010 Winsonia Drive, Shawnee. I have a question. You talk about the $10 million in savings from the street lamps. How many years will it take to earn that $10 million in savings? 7 years. Is this an additional tax or is this in the budget? This 3 point?
No, sorry.
It's not a tax.
It's not a tax, but it's in the city's budget?
No, yeah, sorry, I'm losing my voice, so I apologize. So the payback is within 7 years. The savings that's projected occurs over 30 years. Does that make sense? So the payback in terms of the savings versus the lease payment versus the bond payment, that payback occurs and that's about that 7-year period. But over the life of those lights, that savings actually occurs over a projected 30-year payback.
30 years.
The savings.
Because you're
but-
saying we could have street money for sidewalks and stuff, but 30 years?
That's where
Divided, so that would be-
the 10 million in savings comes
It's
from.
over 30 years.
Yeah, it's a 30-year period. The street light actually pays off, that purchase pays off in 7 years.
My point is, the 10 million is over 30 years. So you're promising sidewalks, storm drainage, and
Nobody
and that
made any
neighborhood.
promises.
I'm not saying okay, then I take that back. But you're saying that money can be used elsewhere, but it's 30 years. That's my only point.
Over 30 years. And not only that, but it's important to note that we are paying for those streetlights now. So we're leasing them basically. So we pay KCP&L every year. So that's where the savings is going to be realized in the end. We're going to get this thing paid off and we don't have to pay those lease payments anymore. And that money can be put back into the general fund to use on a variety of things. New police officers, firemen, sidewalks, whatever, we determine is priority where it needs to go.
So it's not, so you're leasing the poles now, right, all the street lamps, but you're also going to change them to LED, and that's also included in the savings?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to understand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is staff items. Item number 1 is consider ordinance number 3295, amending Title IX of the Shawnee Municipal Code by incorporating by reference the 2019 Uniform Public Offense Code. The city has incorporated the Uniform Public Offense Code published by the League of Kansas Municipalities in the Shawnee Municipal Code. The UPOC is designed to provide a comprehensive public offense ordinance for Kansas cities and in large part parallels the state criminal code. Staff is proposing revisions to Title IX of the SMC to be consistent with 2019 UPOC and state law. An ordinance is required. The recommended action is consider ordinance number 3295. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Miss Larson Vanel.
I just had a quick question. This is probably for Alice. So, and I know that this isn't a change from what we had before, but there are several provisions in the municipal code that were omitted from adoption by Shawnee. And I know that there was a note that basically said that the county and the state have more resources to deal with some of these issues. When you read the things that are omitted, it's things like domestic battery and violation of a protective order or criminal hunting. And these all seem like things that really we could be interested in. And so can you help explain the reasons that those things were selected?
I cannot,
Okay.
but I know our prosecutor, Deb Vermillion, can, and she's here to answer those types of questions.
So in regards to the 4 omissions, the domestic battery, the 2 violation protection order, and the stalking, the district attorney's office has a significant domestic violence program, and they have requested that the cities refer those cases to the county. They have an enormous amount of services that can be provided to domestic violence victims. They have a no tolerance prosecution policy, and so the city just doesn't have those types of services that the county can provide, especially to domestic violence victims. So with that, we have asked that those provisions be omitted so all domestic violence cases can be referred to the district attorney's office.
Is it a similar explanation? Sorry, Michelle. Is it a similar explanation for the other ones, like cruelty to animals?
That's a little bit different. I can go through each one. For instance, on cruelty to animals, we have asked that the UPOC be admitted and that we use the Shawnee Municipal Code that we currently have in effect, 608030. The reason for that is that our ordinance for cruelty to animals is a little bit more expansive than the UPOC. For instance, in our code, we include disfigurement of animals as cruelty. We also construe keeping an animal in a locked hot car to be cruelty to animals, locking them in trunks, those kinds of things. And also there's a provision in the UPOC that deals with hunting, and we already have ordinances that apply to that.
Thank you for that explanation. I was just afraid that somebody would be reading our council packet and think, why doesn't the city care about these things that are really not good things to have happening?
Oh, yeah.
So,
No,
thank you.
we have a strong city ordinance on that, on cruelty to animals.
Any other
Anything else?
questions from the council? Thank you. Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is to consider authorizing the purchase of a used wheel loader for the Public Works Department. The current wheel loader is 20 years old, has reached the end of its useful life. Staff recommends purchasing a replacement for an amount not to exceed $100,000 from auction. The recommended action is to consider authorizing the purchase. And I want everyone to be aware of how proud I am of staff, because just like Public Works does all the time, this is like less than half of what a new one would cost. So the fact that they do this, I want to make sure that that is recognized, that they're very frugal and looking at saving taxpayer dollars. So the recommended action is to consider authorizing the purchase. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 3 is to consider approving the final plans and authorizing staff to bid the 2019 Streambank Stabilization Project number 3492. The project is included in the Stormwater Operations Maintenance Program in the 2019 budget. Final plans are complete and the total estimated cost is $174,300. Recommended actions consider approving the final plans and authorizing staff to bid the project. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 4 is to consider approving the final plans and authorizing staff to bid the Shawnee Town 1929 Town Hall Facility Improvement Project. This project is included in the Facility and Equipment Replacement Program in the 2020 budget. Final plans are complete and the total estimated cost is $150,000. The recommended action is to consider approving the final plans and authorizing staff to bid the project. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Tracy Thomas, 13022 West 76 Terrace. I would just like some clarification about, I was out of town, so I didn't quite understand about when Mr. Holman wanted to buy an old house at 135th Street out in Johnson County and drag it to Shawnee, but now we are paying an architect to look at what was suggested by the public was just make a replica of an older house. So is that included in this? And what's the latest on Doc? What was his name on that old house?
So that doesn't have anything to do with this agenda item. So we only take comments on the current agenda item.
Okay, and you can't answer whether it's included in the money for this?
This is second, it's not included. This is for Shawnee Town Hall.
Yeah, it's a separate project.
Okay, great, thank you.
Town Hall, Tracy.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Roxanne Salas, 11606 West 68th Place, Shawnee Village. Just want to point out, we just are getting ready to approve over $400,000 and stuff that really isn't making a difference. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience like to speak to this item?
Why don't you explain where the money comes from on the Parks Department?
Yeah. Okay, I will accept a motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items. Item number 1 is to ratify the semi-monthly claims for October 14th, 2019 in the amount of $1,617,486.62. Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is miscellaneous council items. Does anyone on the council have an item they would like to discuss? Mr. Jenkins?
Just an item in closing. It just seems to me that in the last 6 months, or maybe in the last year, we seem to be in a hurry to adopt ordinances more so than we used to be. And it doesn't seem like we want to give the full amount of time to vetting those and getting the public involvement in those. I would like to see us stay within our lanes here and utilize the procedures that we have laid out, which is the council committee meeting, and then that gives a lot of time for people to make input and obviously chance to do revisions like we could have done tonight. We could have done these revisions and stuff that we had to do on the fly tonight. We could have done that at a council committee meeting instead of doing it at a council meeting when we're trying to adopt something. And it just seems like, why are we in such a big hurry on some of this stuff? I mean, every now and then, yeah, there's an emergency kind of thing where, like, we've got a drainage pipe's collapsed and the road is now collapsed, and, oh, well, we gotta get that done real quick to get that back in operation, so yeah, we may do that in a really expedited manner. But otherwise, I think we seem to be in an awful hurry lately. We got our hair on fire trying to run the process through very quickly, and I'd like to just see us slow it down just a little bit, you know, and give everybody a chance to kind of digest things a little more.
Thank you. Any other council items they would like just to discuss? Getting into it. All right, seeing none, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.